Welcome to another episode of Ton's Two Cents Podcast. Today's episode is titled GovCon Grifters, Exposing the Pretenders in the GovCon Space. We'll explore how to identify consultants and professionals in the GovCon space who might be taking advantage of some newcomers and people who agree to GovCon, and how to avoid falling for their delusional get-rich-quick schemes. I'm your host, Ton Wilson, and today with us we have Melvin Mooring, the founder of Polish Technologies LLC. Melvin is an experienced professional who previously discovered he was working for a GovCon grifter, which is quite unfortunate. But he brings valuable insights and firsthand experiences to help us navigate this tricky aspect of our industry. Welcome, Melvin, and tell our intellectuals a little bit about yourself.
Sure. Thanks for having me. Melvin Mooring, Polish Technologies founder. We do software development, data management, as well as a great deal of IT staffing. Background real quick, like you said, I dabbled into IT and then went full force into it, but didn't have quite some of the same quals that some of the competition had. So I was like, oh, maybe I should just spend some time doing like sales or BD development. That's usually how a lot of people get into things that they learn it and then they go about doing it, especially if they have a skill set. And so I was a pretty good salesperson and all that. So I learned BD, and turns out I was working for another, it was a good software company supposedly, but we kept putting ourselves in the middle of, oh, we can help this team, we can help this team. And I'm like, next thing you know, I'm basically just a business, not just, but a business developer versus someone who can actually PM and BD the project, all that. And
Yeah.
so I was like, okay, I'll lean into this. The skill set seems pretty, I have a skill set into it. It seems pretty cut and dry, learning a lot. And then turns out, what I'm gathering basically when I'm bringing home the fish, there was no kitchen to cook it in. And I looked behind, going to another analogy and went behind the man and behind the curtain, and there was nothing behind that curtain.
Oh,
And so when I discovered that around when it's time to actually put up or shut up, which, for us means bidding and writing the proposal,
mm,
there was nothing, I had no help. I was very green about that at that time because I wasn't a proposal writer. I was definitely a business developer, and you can't ask one to do the other all the time. And it was very obvious that I needed to get out of that situation before that reputation started becoming my reputation.
yeah.
Um,
Well, you were so new, you were so green, you didn't
right,
know what you didn't
yeah,
know, right? Like,
right,
yeah, and we
exactly,
all kind of fall into GovCon. It's always kind of interesting. No matter how many people I speak to, the path to GovCon, the path to where we're at, is really never a straight path, right? There's so many twists and turns and stuff, but at least you had, and I don't want to get like moral on everyone, but at least you had that moral compass
yes,
or that intuition that there was something not quite right, like about this. There's something that maybe, there's at least you knew something was not right to at least either ask the questions or extract yourself, right,
right.
from
Well,
from a bad
right.
situation.
Because I've been in business. We were in business for a while, just doing commercial stuff, smaller stuff, and even like being a sub of a sub of a sub type of, smaller stuff, right? And so it was just like, why is this working but that not working, or why are we doing it this way when obviously we just need to get the. So I had some experience in business, so that, it's not like we were daisy fresh. Let me just jump out here. But so it was just things weren't matching up or adding up, and it was like like you
Yeah.
said, intuition, and then there's an integrity thing. I mean, we started off doing websites, right? And when you do websites, it's a easy like, hey, what does a client want? Okay, we build the product, and if it's not what they want, we change it and then we fix it, and then they like it, and then we move on, or support it. Whatever we do, it's very simple. But if once things start getting complicated, I'm like, well, why aren't we just supporting it? Why aren't we just just telling them the truth? Why aren't we there's so many things that red flags started adding up to where I was like, oh, okay, this isn't legit. And once
Mhm.
integrity starts leaving the situation, that's when I usually start leaving the situation.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And any, any like ethical person, would. Um, which kind of makes me okay. So, just for a fun question, I always like to start off with like a really fun, random, off the wall, warm up kind of question with all my guests. And a lot of times it goes back to like movies and TVs because I am a binging junkie.
Yes.
But if you were to, compare GovCon or create a GovCon reality TV show, what kind of show would it be?
So if you're a TV buff, if we're talking about reality TV shows, let's go to The Originator. The Originator was the real world
I'm
for us,
not
for our
familiar.
generation. I'll say that. The
Okay.
Real World was the first real
Oh
reality
yes,
show. It was on MTV. Yeah.
yes.
So, and let me do a quick qualifier. Real World seasons 1 through 3, 1 through 4. Right?
Real
They
World
were
New
like
York, not Road
Real World New
Rule.
York,
Yes,
Real World San
was it
Francisco,
Cal?
LA, and I forgot
Yeah,
what the fourth one was. And it's like, you know what, it is a combination of Road Rules 1 at least.
yeah,
Or 2 if you do the boat. But it's a combination of both. Like we're all on the same journey, we're all kind of in the same spot. And we're just like here, and we're in harmony. We're not really, we may and may not get along, but at least we're trying to. We're trying to get along in the same house. There could be some fights and spats between us, but overall, at the end of the whole thing, we're all happy that we did it. You know what I mean? That's kind of how
yeah.
I hope we see it. Then you start thinking about IDIQs and certain GWACs, but really a lot of the IDIQs where it's like 10 of you on there, or 20 or 100 people on the IDIQ, then it starts to become like Big Brother. You got your alliances, but everybody's out for that one thing, and everybody's trying to compete and fight over each other. And it gets a little raunchy, and it gets a little weird, and it gets a little, you know what I mean? So I would like to think the overarching GovCon is, and in my opinion, maybe I'm just an optimist, it's more like
Yeah.
real world. We're all in the same spot, and yes, things can happen, but that's not
You
what the
are
whole
you
environment
are
is.
really dating yourself and
Oh, I
me
know, I'm old.
because
Sorry.
like I
Yeah,
remember when the first Real World, like even launched, I was like, "Oh my God, this is like a train wreck. I cannot take my eyes off of it." But so to maybe make this question a little bit more current for, some of our listeners, I would actually almost think that GovCon is kind of similar to The Bachelor.
okay. Yeah.
And so like The Bachelor or The Bachelorette is like the government,
Hmm.
and there's so many different types of characters and people, and like they all date for different reasons.
Yeah.
They're all there for, like different reasons. They all kind of play, like off of each other. They instigate, they can like form alliances. Like one minute they're all, getting along, and like next minute they're backstabbing each other, and like, someone's kissing someone that they shouldn't be kissing.
Right.
So yeah, Real World and The Bachelor or The Bachelorette is
I can
that's
see that.
GovCon.
That is definitely GovCon to a T. You're
Oh my god.
dating, and then on the dating side, it's like, okay, you're trying to try it out, and yeah, I could see that. Oh my gosh,
Oh
yeah,
yeah, teaming, like, this
yeah,
team is not gonna work. So
exactly. Been there a lot.
oh, yes, yes. So, anyways, let's get serious here
Yeah,
because, and I think, for the intellectuals who follow me, they know, I've been using a couple of hashtags a lot over the past year, and GovCon Grifters is one of my hashtags. It is my mission in life to dispel any type of just quackery and just things that are just, like not correct. But um, let's kind of talk about this because you and I were talking about something different, and I thought, oh my God, what a great podcast episode this would be is to talk about GovCon
yes,
grifters because it impacts everybody.
it
It
does.
impacts industry, it impacts the customers,
Hmm.
it impacts the government.
Yeah,
And so let's just kind of like dive straight into it about, like basically like what I see is just there's this huge rise in GovCon grifters out there. And so let's talk about grifting and what it looks like in practice. And so, like in your experience, and you shared in your background here about your experience and your involvement, with GovCon grifting, and like so. What are some kind of common traits or tactics
mhm,
that these individuals and sometimes a lot of firms, right, with like no name people, you don't know who they are, but they're telling me I can get on a GSA schedule. And by the way, did you know that I can get this contract and whatever? They use these shells of these firms, and they try to present, and some people try to present themselves as these experts, but what have they really, like delivered? So let's talk about, some common traits and tactics that these companies and people use.
sure. First and foremost, I've noticed that if we're talking about that kind of grifting, it is the on that BD side. It's kind of, it's almost probably the easiest part of GovCon to kind of slip in and say, hey, I can do this for you and get money out of it, and long term money. It's not like proposal writing where there's a product I need immediately and I'm like, clearly you can't write, move on, right? Like business development does take time, even on the commercial side. If you do it right, it does take time, especially on the government side. So the timetable, everybody says 1.5 years to two, really on that two side, for a new company that is actually prepared and may have past performance commercial, still
Yeah.
might be in a 2 year cycle of procurement and all that stuff, even if they're just eyeing one procurement, that they may have saw ahead of time. Great, yay. But pre solicitation came out, and then it doesn't come out for another couple of years. That's typical. Um, and understanding that, a newbie may not understand that, and even
Mhm.
experienced companies trying to look in the government, and we'll just call them gov newbies at that point. They won't know that, or won't really recognize that. They hear it, but then it's like, no, I've seen this company do this.
Yeah.
No, it takes that long. And anybody that says otherwise, that's one red flag right there.
It's not
That
going
is
to
a
happen
few and
tomorrow.
far between.
Like what? Things don't happen instantaneously. Uh,
Yeah, surprise, surprise, right? Like you can't get everything you want immediately. And what do you want? And is it a project that you could do? I can get a janitorial thing right now, but that's not my wheelhouse. I know enough people in that space, all that, yay. But again, that's not my wheelhouse. That's
yeah.
another clue. Why are you just throwing anything at me? I'm let's say at the time I'm a web developer and I do have some API development skills. Let's talk about back when I was at 2015 here, right? Here we go. We got some API skills. We may have built a platform here and there, but we don't really have any like real quals. Why are you promising me that I can get a contract in 6 months or even less than that? So that's red
Yeah.
flag number one, right? Like you can't promise something even if you haven't even looked into my company and see what I am good at. You're just trying to figure it out. So that's number one. Two, they're always going to go after the newbies. They're always going to go after somebody at a certain level. Whether you may understand certain things about government contracting. You may understand that it is a 2 year cycle, but you don't understand maybe like how to work with this agency, or what is the procurement cycle? What's the first step of the procurement? Those little things that you may not know that we seasoned folks will definitely know. They're going to take advantage of that. And there's like a certain type of newbie, somebody that jumped out here, you know what I mean, recently. I'm like, I want to do this. I see these people with
Mhm.
these contracts. I just want to sub under here or do this. There's certain buzzwords that those type of folks
Yeah.
hear and they attract themselves to, and they're like, now I have a pitch for that. I liken
So
it to, okay.
yeah. No, no, no. I was just kind of going to expand on that too. Is the buzzwords and different things. I think there's such a huge rise in companies that outwardly solicit other companies and other people to go after some of these vehicles. Before we started recording, we were talking about NASA Soup. You could even relate that to like Oasis, any of the GSA, type of BICs and GWACs. There are so many big contracts that are multi-year, multi-award. And so these companies or these people in particular are going out and being like, you too could have this vehicle. You too should be on that. And so they start to kind of market this very FOMO kind of approach to it. It's like, oh, you're going to get shut out. I can't
Right.
tell you how many people come to me and be like, hey, what can you tell me about this contract and should I go after it? And my back question is, well, what do you know about it and how did you come across it? Because it's like if you saw something in someone's marketing, like that's why we don't do this here at Netflix. We don't go out and be like, hey, did you know this contract is coming out? You need to get on this.
Right.
First of all, that's not the type of work that we do,
Exactly.
from a bid perspective, because we do big strategic, type of opportunities, not these multi awards where you still have to compete with 8 million of your
Exactly.
closest friends. But I think they really kind of capitalize on this FOMO, this fear of missing out, type of things, and that's a really that's an effective tactic for people who are not experienced.
One of the oldest sales tactics, right? Like when I learned sales, more or less, it was one of the first things. You make them feel like they're missing out. Like if you're putting an event on, it's sold out. No, it's not, but you're going to tell them it's sold out. You're standing outside of the club, and here's a real analogy for this one. You're standing outside the club, and there's a line, but there's nobody in there. I mean,
Oh, like
that's
building the suspense.
yeah, building the suspense, and they'll capitalize on that. I'll see stuff on YouTube. I didn't even know this person, and then some. I won't say names, but I didn't even know this person. They look like they have a good business, but the way they come off is very like, yeah, but that doesn't work for everybody. And that would be a probably the third thing I would say. The one size fits all. That's not going to work for everyone. I mean, I was taking on a kid that was trying to figure out how to do government contracting. I'm like, cool. I got an advisor was like, hey, you can talk to them about this. I'm like, sure. The poor person did not have a business. I'm being clear. Didn't
Yeah.
have a business, didn't have a focus. And if you don't have a business, but you're doing something, that's one thing, but he didn't have a focus on what he wanted to present to the government as this is what I can do for you. And so I'm
Hmm.
walking him down that path and kind of saying that. And as I'm talking, I'm like, a grifter would totally take advantage of this guy right now.
Yeah. You can
Where,
almost spot them coming, right? It's like
yeah,
and the other thing too is the whole and you definitely touched on it is these 60 promises of, hey, I did it too, you can do this. And so again, we're not going to name names, we're going to protect the guilty here. But they're all over YouTube, they're all over, LinkedIn now about this is what success looks like, or this is what $1 million looks like,
right.
like somehow I'm supposed to look at them and be like, oh my God, I want to look and be like you, right? It's like that whole
Yeah,
selling this like new GovCon American dream that you too
right.
can do this. But what they fail to tell you, if you really kind of dig deep into the FPDS reports and them in particular, it's like they won one contract, okay, or they won that contract and never won anything else. So now they can say, without lying, I won a multi-million-dollar contract. But it was one contract, one customer, one
Right.
time for one company or whatever the scenario. That does
Exactly.
not make a success story that has any type of longevity or credibility, which
Right.
is the difference between people who pontificate a market versus people who are practitioners.